And joining us now in the Digital Center is Representative Sean Quinlan. He is the representative for the North Shore, all the wonderful communities north here of Oahu. And it's good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Annalisa. Great to see you too.
And happy lead up to the new legislative session.
Yes, always an exciting time of year.
What are you most excited about?
Well, I don't know if it's exciting, but we have to make sure that we have a healthy, balanced budget. There's a lot of uncertainty at the federal level. They've been talking about cuts to SNAP, to EBT, to other federal programs. So I know we have a lot of money in the rainy day fund. We have to be careful about spending that down. So I think what you'll see this year is a combination of different things to make sure that we do have a balanced budget, whether it's potentially raising the conveyance tax on homes over $4 million or pausing some of the tax cuts at the very high range of earners. But we want to make sure that we take care of our middle class and working class families because this is a time of inflation and uncertainty and wavering consumer confidence, little soft tourism. So it's a sort of a high wire act.
I have to say, you have been a little bit less doom and gloom than I thought it would be. I mean, people are really concerned about how much shortfall we have and how can we really keep critical programs going, you know, with housing costs and, like you said, inflation. How do you stay positive? You don't have to sugarcoat it here. This is, this isn't on air. This is, a discussion. So
every morning I wake up and I see my son's smiling face and my wife, and I look out my window and I can see Mount Kaala, and I guess I'm just a happy guy.
But in all seriousness, no, you have a very tough job ahead of you, along with your fellow lawmakers, of determining how to generate enough revenue to compensate for all the loss on the federal side. I mean, are there concrete ones that you can see right now?
That's the real difficulty, is the messaging we're getting from the federal government has been so inconsistent and so scattershot. It is really difficult to plan, and that's why we are so hesitant to draw down on the rainy day fund. For example, that very long federal shutdown cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $38 million to ensure that people still receive their SNAP benefits. If it had gone on longer, we would have had to further dip into the rainy day fund. We'll see a new Council on Revenues report soon. I hope it's positive. But I have every faith in my colleagues, in the governor, in the administration, that we can figure out a way to make this work.
Well, there is a lot of change happening, especially with the change in the Finance Committee chair.
Yes.
So do you anticipate that would help tackle a lot of the kind of blockades that lawmakers have been complaining about with certain bills, certain things getting done?
Well, I'll say that it's very exciting that the Big Island has a finance chair for the first time in 25 years. So I think that's going to be a really positive thing for the county of Hawaii. I don't know about blockades. I think every year in the legislature is unique. I think every year presents its own challenges. In a weird way, it can be simpler when you know that you're more financially constrained because you really dial down to the basic needs of what Hawaii needs to continue to function properly.
Do you think the timing of this leadership change will actually be good, considering some of the hard decisions that need to be made, or do you think that will kind of create more uncertainty?
I think it's good to have a fresh perspective, and just selfishly speaking for my generation, it's nice to see someone who's also a young father like myself, because he understands the daily challenges that we all face, whether it's trying to pay for preschool or, God forbid your kid joins a soccer league and you have to travel for it, and all these little expenses that young parents have.
Well, speaking of young parents, you mentioned before we came on air about the preschool program. So talk about some of these very important programs that cater to parents and being able to support the workforce.
Yeah, I'm really excited that as of January this year, Preschool Open Doors is now open to 2-year-olds, and that's just a huge benefit to local working families because if one of the parents has to stay home and look after the kid, they're not working, and it's really tough to make it these days as a single income household.
And the costs of childcare in general.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah.
If you're
As parents, we were saying we were parents.
If you send your kid to a private preschool, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,000 a month. I mean, that's essentially a private school tuition.
Is there, this session, are there other efforts to try to help with childcare and with kind of keeping parents in the workforce, especially, I know a lot of mothers who are considering leaving or have left because of that?
We're looking at trying to improve the child care tax credit to make it more accessible and more impactful. So that's another sort of arrow in our quiver that I think could help young working mothers.
And when you bring up taxes, so another conversation that we're seeing this session is the tax breaks and potentially rolling back some of that.
Well, I wouldn't say we're going to roll anything back. We're going to continue to increase the standard deduction for both single people and married couples, and that benefit overwhelmingly flows to the working class and the middle class. For some of our very high earners, we may have to temporarily pause those tax cuts as we try to get more certainty from the federal government.
Okay, and we're talking about economy also, tourism, agriculture, some of these big industries. What are you hoping? I know there's a lot of discussion about how the change in the gear for sports tourism, right? Where do you see the future of our tourism economy here?
Well, presumably, we're building a new stadium soon, and we are hopeful that the project can bring a lot of exciting new competitions, team sports. We've been talking to Women's Major League Soccer. We've been talking to the NFL. Of course, we're always talking to our partners at the PGA Tour. But one thing I do want to caution is that we tend to take tourism for granted. We just think, well, it's always been there. It'll always be there. But the industry is more fragile than people think. And I know that, especially on the North Shore of Oahu, people are often very unhappy with the level of tourism. And I think we have to be mindful of not just the jobs that tourism creates, but also the revenues. But more importantly than that, we have to be mindful of the impact on communities. I mean, if my son wants to go see his grandmother at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, sometimes I have to tell him, we're not going to sit in traffic for an hour, buddy. We'll wait until the evening to go see Popua. And that's really tough. So we are working on the North Shore on efforts to guide visitors to park and ride, shuttle systems. We're improving the parking lot at Laniakea. We're getting a bypass road. And we're trying to replicate the model they use on the North Shore of Kauai, where, it's one thing, it's very easy and simple to say, visitors come in, they pay lots of money, we tax them, and we manage flows of money. But what we haven't done ever in the history of Hawaii until recently on the North Shore of Kauai is we haven't managed flows of people. And that's what we have to start doing to provide relief and improve quality of life for those communities that have been most impacted by the visitor industry, but also the ones that are contributing the most.
And there's obviously a lot of development ideas out there. The gondola, top of mind right now.
Yes.
What's your stance on that? Again, a lot of controversy, obviously. What do you think the future of that is?
I think that if some clown thinks that he's going to put a gondola on the side of Mount Kaala, he should think again.
There seems to be some support for it.
There is no support in my community for a gondola. None whatsoever. From Wahiawa to Mililani to the North Shore, Haleiwa, Wailua, Haula, Laie, Kahuku. Nobody wants to see a gondola on the side of a sacred mountain. So I will be introducing legislation to ban gondolas, chairlifts, funiculars, any sort of motorized device that takes you up the side of a mountain this year. If you want to see a nice view, hike up there like everybody else.
Okay, what about the housing development that's supposed to be behind the market that's there? That little sliver of land.
Right. There has been a proposal for a 300-unit, quote-unquote, affordable housing development. Unfortunately, so few of the units are actually affordable, and so many of them are at market rate. I can't support that. It's not going to house local people. We'll just be importing more people from the mainland. The
challenge, though, I guess the argument for affordable housing in that area, there is a need, right?
There's a huge need. What we saw during COVID was there's a tremendous spike in rent prices, right? And so a lot of folks who previously were able to rent and work in Haleiwa now had to rent somewhere else. So we've got a little bit of a labor shortage for our restaurants and shops. And again, if the units were truly affordable, that's something I'd have to think very carefully about. But so few of the units are affordable, I'm not sure who we're proposing to build this for.
Well, and then it goes back to that whole question of how to develop it's that fine line developers have to dance around when they're trying to create these projects. Is there any kind of financing solutions that the state can offer that can help this a reality? Because this affordable housing thing is
there are a lot of
problem.
financing options. I mean, there are LIHTC tax credits, the low-income housing tax credits. We have the dwelling unit revolving fund. We have the rental housing revolving fund. And there are a lot of really good projects that are truly affordable going up all over this island and all over the state. Just the one in Haleiwa, unfortunately, isn't one of them. And I think the city's 201H process is somewhat fatally flawed and probably needs to be revisited in the near future.
Okay. All right. So turning to other issues, what else? I know there's a lot of discussion about the corruption
Yes.
case that has been kind of lingering over the legislature. Do you see this actually advancing and seeing an investigation this session?
Okay, so there's a few things I want to point out because a lot of people are asking the legislature to investigate. I think the first thing I would say is I don't think it's a good look for a legislative body to investigate itself. I don't think people will feel that it's an impartial investigation. I would absolutely welcome, an Attorney General investigation or the Campaign Spending Commission. Now, the $35,000, we're being told by the U.S. Attorney, was not a federal bribery charge. It was a campaign spending violation. So if it is a campaign spending violation, I urge the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice to release the names immediately to the Attorney General, to the Campaign Spending Commission, to us, the legislature, so that the appropriate investigative body can do a thorough investigation. If the legislature were to do an investigation, it basically consists of this. We would convene a committee, and we would ask all current and former legislators who were serving at the time to come to a room, come to a podium, and we would ask them, did you do it? And then they'll say no. And then we'll ask them, do you know who did it? And then they'll say no. And it's not perjury to tell us that they didn't do it even if they did. It's just lying. So there's no further civil or criminal penalty. Why would somebody, for no reason whatsoever, incriminate themselves? It just doesn't make any sense. So I understand the frustration. I wish I knew who it was. I wish Civil Beat knew who it was. If I knew who it was, I'd be yelling their name from the rooftops. And it makes me sick to my stomach that I serve with people who are taking bribes. It really does. But this is the situation we're in. So I just hope and pray that whether it's the FBI or the DOJ wraps up its investigation quickly so that we can get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, we are introducing legislation to extend the statute of limitations for campaign spending violations. So even if for whatever reason it takes longer than we would like, we'll still be able to prosecute this person in the future.
Well, and that's the problem with this, right? Like you mentioned, the problems if you were to do an investigation, the legislature were supposed to do it. But is there a way to ease the public's concerns about this, other than DOJ, other than something the legislature would do? Is there something that can kind of close this out, because it's gone on so long, and I think it's hindered trust.
And you're right, it has hindered trust, and that's the frustration for all of us. It's like, okay, you caught this guy in 2022, it's now 2026. How can there still be an ongoing investigation? If you have evidence, if you have proof, bring it out into the public eye. Instead, the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice and our own Attorney General's Office have consistently told us publicly and privately, do not interfere in an ongoing investigation. Okay, if there's an ongoing investigation, you got to wrap this up, guys. It's about time.
Do you think there's just not enough will in this issue? Like it's not that big of a deal?
It's a very big deal to me. And I don't, we're just completely flying blind because they won't tell us anything. Civil Beat was able to see some of the redacted information, but they don't have the name either. And I've spoken to some folks over there, and they said if they had the name, they would absolutely release it. So it seems to me that the only people who actually have the names work at the Department of Justice, and they are refusing to release those names to our own state authorities. The Campaign Spending Commission has broad investigative powers and punitive powers, as does the Attorney General's Office. I'd like to see the experts thoroughly investigate and prosecute this case before it drags on any longer.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone's kind of just shocked about, like why there's been no answers since. So anyway, let's see what happens there. Anything else on your radar that you would like people to know as far as going into this session? I know the finance is a big thing, but is there any kind of push that you are working on personally?
Well, we're still looking to improve healthcare outcomes. So I'm looking at a sort of a pared down version of last year's nurse staffing ratios. The reality is, in a lot of different units in our hospitals, we have too many patients for too few nurses, and we're seeing a lot of burnout, and we're seeing bad outcomes because one nurse can't necessarily at the end of a 12-hour shift juggle all these patients. So I think it's really important for the future health of our healthcare system that we come up with a way that we can retain nurses, that patients are safer, and that we don't run into a situation 10, 15 years from now where we have this wave of retirements and we don't have enough nurses to replace them because we have an aging population.
So you're talking about maybe codifying the patient ratios in statutes, so it's not this instance that we're seeing where people are striking because they want fair contracts. Is that what we're talking about? Like
exactly.
Making it more formalized in our state laws.
I think we just have to compromise somewhere between the nurse's position and the healthcare system's position, and I think that would be better for all of us.
Do you have a stance on, say, the merger with HMSA and HPH? Do you think that will help or hinder some of our healthcare costs here? Because that's a huge thing. We're talking about, ACA premiums up, Obamacare legacy types of benefits gone.
I'm generally not in favor of vertically integrated mergers. I'm a huge fan of the Sherman Antitrust Act. I'm a huge fan of Theodore Roosevelt. So I think there are some very tough questions that need to be asked before this merger is approved.
All right. And anything else? This is your chance to talk about any issue that is coming up and maybe people need to be aware of at this point.
I would just encourage people to reach out to your legislator. Just give us a call. Give me a call. Anyone that lives in my district, or shoot me an email. It's so important to get that feedback from the public because we can't be everywhere at once, and there are just so many problems and issues facing us. But I will say that the beautiful thing about living in Hawaii is that we have this unique culture, and I truly believe that we're going to continue taking care of each other with a lot of aloha, and I guess that's why I'm maybe a little more optimistic than people might think I would be under
I
these
have to
circumstances.
say, I do feel a different vibe. It could be just North Shore vibes, like when I talk to other lawmakers, I feel like there's just kind of this, I don't want to say pessimism, but kind of a concern, like a little bit more serious concern. And I feel like you give off a little bit more optimism.
Well, I mean, I would say I'm concerned. At times I'm scared. At times I'm heartbroken.
You don't show it.
But I think we have to link arms and we have to imua.
Do you think people are engaging with the legislature? Are you hearing people engage, or have they become so frustrated and so upset that they just are backing off and just saying?
Well, my mom gives out my cell phone number at Foodland, so I'm
Complain to Sean, everybody.
I would say that my level of engagement is pretty steady at a very, very high level. But yeah, I haven't felt. I think people are maybe engaging even a little bit more than they normally would, just because of all the uncertainty that we're facing together.
And it's an election year, so I would think that the engagement for a lot of lawmakers should be active in there. Yeah, so.
Exactly.
But Representative Sean Quinlan with North Shore Oahu here with us today, and good luck with the session. We'll be all watching.
Thanks, Annalisa. Appreciate you.
All right, and I'm Annalisa Burgos here on Hawaii News Now.